Samuel Ritchie. As we get it? He was born to parents who had recently relocated to North America from Northern Ireland. Their move from the Londonderry area took them to Ohio, where they settled near Akron or near Boston Township and connected with other Presbyterian. Some sources claim that Samuel was born at Hudson in the Summit County of Ohio. Boston and Hudson are also names of townships in northern Ontario. These townships are near the 1888 surveys conducted by Alexander Niven and others. Did the Ohio activity of Ritchie influence the naming of these townships? Samuel was born in Ohio in 1838, which coincides with the year of the crowning of Queen Victoria. He was the eldest of 7 children born to Martha and Anthony Ritchie. Was Martha born a Ritchie? Some sources claim her as the daughter of Isabel and William Ritchie and as the wife of Anthony Ritchie. If true, then the Ritchie bloodline leading to Martha was likely from the Ulster area of Ireland and included a series of William Ritchie patriarchs. Her father would have been William VI. Samuel Ritchie went on to marry Sophronia Hale, who had been born in a nearby community named Bath of Summit County. Interestingly enough, the name Sophronia Hale connects to Chelmsford, near Boston, Massachusetts, when searched for. This girl lived from 1779 to 1836 and became the wife of Oliver Whipple. Did the Hale of Chelmsford connect to the Hale of Bath? We are told that the future wife of Samuel Ritchie was born in 1841. She had several children, including Clara Bell Ritchie. Clara Bell will eventually become the namesake of a lake and a mine in the Sudbury area. Sudbury was the junction site of a Canadian Pacific station and was named such in the early 1880s. Sudbury Junction was named after the area of interest of the Hitchcock bloodline, who had created the second wife of railroad engineer James Worthington. Chelmsford was the name of a station on the main line of the Canadian Pacific. It was about 10 miles distant from the Sudbury Junction. Worthington had been the chief field engineer of that section of the CP extension in the early 1880s. The Worthington had plenty of Ohio connections during their rise as quarrymen who invested in railroads while they built up a construction business. Did they connect to the Hale and Ritchie in Ohio? The Worthington arrived in Upper Canada from the Midlands of England in 1841 or thereabouts. They were orphans and they were young adults. They quickly built up a quarry business based in Upper Canada. Samuel Ritchie began his own businesses. The first attempt involved supplying lumber to the railroaders. By 1867 the British governors created the Dominion of Canada as a semi-self-governed nation. Meanwhile, Samuel Ritchie was still in Ohio, where he was building a carriage company. He had partners. Over the next few years and after selling his shares in the carriage company, he traveled and invested in several business ventures as he moved around. Consider that he'd invested in a West Virginia factory that burnt down in 1878 and that there was a Ritchie bloodline in Virginia who'd been in the area for many generations. Did the bloodlines relate? So far we have noted 3 different Ritchie bloodlines in this story. One was settled in Virginia. The other led to William Ritchie and his daughter Martha. Then there was the bloodline of Anthony Ritchie, which led to Samuel Ritchie. It might be interesting to note a 4th bloodline. William Ritchie was also the name of a Scotland-based bloodline who ended up invested in dockyards and who built ships in Ireland. Were they connected to any of the other bloodlines noted? William McMullen was active in Picton, Ontario, Canada. Picton was also noted as the place of activity of Letitia Creighton, who was a daughter of Annie Bishop. Why mention that? Letitia Humans Creighton was born to John Creighton. His bloodline had come to Upper Canada from Ireland. He settled a farmstead near Coburg, which was named after Queen Victoria's bloodline. Letitia became a social female voice for reformer groups. Her early education came from the local innkeeper. Her father died when she was 16. She married Humans, who was a widower with 8 children. Who was the innkeeper? Creighton Mine began operating in 1901 and was about 6 miles south of Bishop Road, which was the north border of Snider Township, which was on the eastern border of Creighton Township. Possibly all coincidental. However, Consider that Samuel Ritchie met up with McMullen, who was based in Chicago, where he promoted railroads. McMullen had likely left Picton due to his part in corruption of the Pacific scandals, which also led to the demise of the First Dominion of Canada administration led by PM John Macdonald. McMullen introduced Ritchie around, and Ritchie. McMullen had a brother, and J.B. McMullen had control of a Picton to Trenton Railroad in 1880 when Macdonald was incorporating the Canadian Pacific Railway Company. In 1878 Macdonald had survived the Pacific Scandal inquest and was re-elected as the federal Prime Minister of the Dominion of Canada. The Picton to Trenton line was run as Prince Edward County Railway. McMullen partnered up with Samuel Ritchie and with William Coe of Matic, and the group went about exploring the Coe Hill mine. The project was never successful, and Ritchie moved his operations towards the Sudbury Basin hills by the mid-1880s. He had become the leading figure of the Canadian Copper Company. They bought claims in the Copper Cliff area and in the Sudbury Basin in general, and by 1902 they were bought out and merged with Orford and with International Nickel of New Jersey to become International Nickel Company. The Trenton to Picton railroaders had built a line to Coe Hill, and the railroad was renamed as Central Ontario Railway. The COR, along with other Ritchie assets, were highly controlled by Ohio-based capitalists. Meanwhile, Orford was under the management of Colonel Robert Means Thompson and was based in New Jersey. Thompson went on to build the Thompson Mine story. Thompson Mine was a INCO project in the province of Manitoba. It was several hundred miles north of Winnipeg. Was it? Robert Means Thompson, 1849–1930, was a naval commander. He was raised in Pennsylvania and ended up a lawyer in Boston. His interests led him into the mining sector, and he became part of the Orford story. His mother was Agnes Kennedy. Interestingly, Charles Saunders ended up married to Eliza Kennedy and then was hired by the Ritchie Group to build the Copper Cliff mining town. He had gone to the Pembroke area to meet relatives of the Chew family. His uncles were lumber merchants who had taken him to the Chelmsford area from their base near Penetang, where Salter had commenced his 1850s journey into the untamed wilderness of the Northlands of Huron Lake. Orford, as we get it, were the patrons of Joseph Errington, who had been raised near Books Falls, Ontario, by parents who had come that way via the Ontario lake shores. Errington was sent to Salter Township to open up the Massey Mine. Salter Township was surveyed in 1861 by Charles Unwin while Salter was surveying Victoria Township. He then went on to help build the Chelmsford story by opening up the Errington claims with Treadwell Yukon financing, and then with guys like Thayer Lindsay he helped build the Falcon Bridge story. Falcon Bridge became a corporation in the late 1920s, as did the Canadian National Railway Company. Treadwell Yukon was a Berkeley mining school group that included the Bradley as leaders of Alaska Mine and Treadwell Yukon Mine. Both of those mines were financed by the Rothschild bankers. As we get it, CN took over CNOR assets and some Grand Trunk assets and became the second Canadian Intercontinental. CP had been the first and was complete by 1885. Inco was a Canadian corporation. For several years Canadian Copper Company and Orford continued to operate as divisions of the bigger corporation. Clarabelle Mine in McKim Township was a few miles south of the Murray Mine in McKim Township. Murray had been the first mine exploited in the area and had become a Vivian of Swansea property by the time Ritchie arrived in the Sudbury Basin. McKim Township is the east neighbor of Snider Township. The Salter mineral source noted by the mapmaker of the 1850s was near the Creighton mine, which is on the southern border of Snider and Creighton townships. The town of Copper Cliff was built by Charles Saunders in the early 1900s for the Ritchie Group and became the site of the Copper Cliff smelter. Copper Cliff is in Snider Township and is the home of the lake and mine named after Clarabelle Ritchie. A crude smelter operated near the Clarabelle Lake in the mid-1880s. Samuel Ritchie lived until 1908 and was in West Virginia when he passed on. He was put to rest in Ohio, where he had made his home base.